Hello everyone, my name is Sagita and today in this video I will show you around Photoshop. As you might already know, Photoshop is used for editing pictures, making collages, and basically doing any kind of pixel-based artwork or work that you might be required. I'll show you first around Photoshop what all the tools and toolbars are. Well, probably not all of them, but the most useful ones. And afterwards, I'll show you how to edit a scan or a photo of a drawing that you have taken. This will be the first part of the Photoshop tutorial. So to start with, as an editing software, I'll go to File New or Control N to start open a new file or create a new file. Also, just as a note, I'm using a Windows-based computer, so whenever I say Control and something for shortcuts, for a Mac that would be Command and whichever letter I say. I'll try to remind it. However, in case I don't, please note that I'm using a Windows-based computer. So when you start a new document, you will see the option to choose the document size. Obviously, you can enter whatever size you want, or you can just choose one of the preset drawing sizes. Normally, what I would do is I would go for either like an A3 or A2 or whichever drawing I would need, drawing size I would need. However, as we are working with digital submissions, you can always take the advantage of actually knowing using pixel sizes. So for example, if I wanted to, I could make something that is fit for a 1920, so a high definition monitor, and it would be 1280 high. And at resolution, which is important for Photoshop because obviously it's pixel based, so this actually tells you how many pixels per inch you will have. You can also change the pixels per centimeter, but I'm not doing that because the most DPI settings anywhere you will see on screens, computers, and stuff, they are always based in inches. So unless you have a specific requirement to do it in pixels per centimeter, I would just say stick to pixels per inch. And on this one, I will do 250, which is plenty. And just as a note, you do not need to set your drawings at this size. This is the absolutely maximum I would ever go for. And if you're not going to be using your drawing or whatever you're creating at a full screen size, definitely go for a smaller one because this will be quite heavy on your computer. The next thing, you can choose your color mode. I have already spoken about color modes in Digital Principles video, so you can check that out for difference between the two. Obviously, as this is a digital submission, I will go with RGB. However, if I wanted to do colors that are accurate for printing, I would go with CMYK. And the background color, I always go for white unless you need it. Obviously, there's more advanced options if you need to set up something specific in your drawings. So I'll create this just as an example, and so this is it. This is your drawing setup, and you can only have one at a time in Photoshop, so you can work on one particular document at a time. So what we have here is you have your little options for your tools on top. So now I'm in Zoom one. You would start in one of the probably top ones in selection and moving tool. And as similarly as other Adobe software, once you click on them, you will see that the options up there change depending on which tool you have selected. So doesn't matter at the moment. And on the top and on the left hand side, you can see the rulers. If you don't see them, I think Control R is the shortcut to change whether you see them or not. And similarly, as in Illustrator, you can actually, or in InDesign, you can actually drag and drop them to create some ruler guides, which will be really useful later for when I'm showing you how to straighten up a drawing. Now I'll go back, and also on this note, if you are familiar with Control Z combination, which usually goes back. So what happens in Photoshop if you just do, as I'm pressing now Control Z, you can see it only takes me back and forward the one step I just did. If you want to go back multiple steps, you want to press Control Alt Z. So if I'll just quickly draw something. So if I have the shape here, and if I want to go back, so you see I can go Control Z and it just goes back and forth. And if I go Control Alt Z, it will go back, and I do it again, and it will just go back before I draw the margin of my shape. So on the right hand side we have our panels, and similarly as in other Adobe software, you might have a different layout here depending on which version you're using, or maybe you have customized it. Obviously up here you can change it to which kind of if you're working on something specific. If I, for example, switch to graphic and web, you will just see that it automatically changes the panels to the panels that would more likely be using instead of what I'm doing at the moment. I'll just stick to essentials because that's what most of us get, and once you get more familiar with Photoshop, you can obviously customize these to fit your needs. And the most important one in Photoshop is the layers one, because layers is basically the sections of the drawing which you layer up from um, from top to bottom, and it allows you to control each of them individually. So if I was drawing something, so let's say I'll do the same actually. Yeah, I'll just draw the rectangular shapes. So if I draw these shapes here, they're all, well, okay, this is actually a bad example because as you can see it automatically creates new layers for each of them. Instead I will do what I did before. I'll just use the Marquee tool, and I will color them in. I'll do multiple ones. So what happens here is if they're all on the same layer, as you can see, and even worse, they're all in the background layer, I can't do anything. I can't select them because the background layer is locked, which it automatically allows me to do. However, if I want to convert to normal layers, if I do that, I can select move it around. However, what happens is I'm obviously moving everything rather than just the one object I wanted. So I'll go back multiple steps, and instead of, if I do all of these shapes, I just draw on new layers. So here I'll just create a new layer, and I go into the Marquee tool, and then I fill it in. So now when I select, even if I deselect this, I have selected my layer, and as I moved around, I'm only moving the shape. So if I'm on the same layer and I draw a new shape, I'll just draw the same one. Now what happens is, if I'm on this layer and I decide to move around, I'm moving all of these shapes separately. Of course, I could use the Marquee tool here, select this particular shape. Okay, but I do it this way, and I could just move this part of the drawing. However, you would need to select it separately every time. However, if I do it in a separate layer, in a separate layer, I'll do the round shape, and I will fill it in. So now I have my two layers, and I can do stuff to them separately. Obviously, it's not just about moving and scaling them around. I can also afterwards apply certain effects and properties to each of the layers separately. So always use layers, and the more complex the drawing is, the more useful the layers will come in, because obviously then, let's say I've done a render and I've added some people in it, and I don't like the particular people shapes I've added in them. I can very easily just change what I have on that particular layer with the people, rather than changing the entire drawing and needing to cut them out of the base. I'll delete these now, and I'll delete the other one. So, and as you can see here, you have the option to group layers. So if you have multiple layers so that it's getting too difficult to see what's actually going on, you can always group them in little folders and sort of like open and close them, so it allows you to just work and focus on specific parts of your document. And also when you I'll just create a new layer, you can always double click on it, and you can just rename it to whatever you want. And obviously once you have like 20, 30, 50 layers, it's much easier to actually scroll through and see which one is which. And to change layer order, so I'll just draw this shape again. Sorry, and I got that error because I haven't selected which layer I'm actually working in. So I'm selecting my test layer, and I'm filling it in, and I'll create a new layer. I will call this, I'll just leave it as this for now, and I'll do a new shape here, and color it something different. And so now you can see that this red shape is on top of the green one. However, if I want to swap them around in in how they appear, I just drag and drop it below it, and it changes the order, and I can do it again. So obviously this will work with as many layers you want. And if I wanted to put them in a group, I just select them both. So I'm using the Shift key on my keyboard. So I select one, Shift, and click on the other, and I create a new group. So you can see this is group 1, and I can rename it to color shapes. And now I open the layer, and I see them both here. So hopefully that's straightforward. And I'll go through the tools, and then I will talk more about the options with adjustments and that kind of stuff. So I'll create a new one. And also the good thing you can do in Photoshop is the little eye icons here. So if I just click on it, it will turn it off, so it doesn't. So I can actually see what's underneath. And obviously, if I'm working on something else, it allows me to focus on that particular thing. So on the left-hand side here, you will see a toolbar. It might be looking slightly different, but it's the same exact tools in, I believe, most versions of Photoshop. And I want to say I'm using CC 16 or 17, I believe. So the first one is the Move tool. You can just select your layers. I already showed you. Well, now you can't see it if I click here. And yeah, if I'm selecting the group, it's already selecting the entire group. If I'm selecting a specific layer, it's selecting a specific layer, and now I can move it around. And you can also do some basic transformation tools. And obviously you can do more, but this is just the basic in here. What I will do next is finish with that. Close it up so it doesn't interrupt what I'm showing. So the next one is the marquee tool. So you can see. So what it allows you to do is just select rectangular elliptical shapes. So it's useful for if you're cutting out big chunks of something, you can select it. So if I was actually, I'll leave these on. So if I was in this layer and I wanted to cut out the shape, I'll just draw a marquee, and if I hit delete on my keyboard, you will see it deletes the color. Or alternatively, I can draw a marquee, and as I was doing previously, you just choose color, and by using the paint bucket tool, you just color it in. And well, here it did it because it already has pixels in this particular layer. Because I'm working in it, it only colored the one part that it recognizes the same color pixels. I can click it also here, and it will just color it in. And you can do the elliptical marquee, which would allow you to select round shapes. If you press down Shift, it will do it as a circle. If no, it will just do an ellipse, which you can control yourself. Also here with the shortcuts, so if you have selected something and you want to deselect it, just Control D or Command D on a Mac will allow you to deselect what you have selected. Next one is the Lasso Tools. So there is the Lasso tool, which is sort of like a very freeform one, which you would just draw and select something as you draw. This is it might be useful for some very quick cutouts. So if you just want to cut out some background from something, you just select it, and then here, yeah, if I hit delete, it will just delete it. A more accurate one would be the polygonal lasso tool. So this one here allows you to select shapes based on just clicking, and it sort of like draws a straight line between the 2 points. And obviously you can zoom in and make it very, very accurate. Here there's no point because everything is obviously very straight up, but if it wasn't, and I'll show you later, I'll show you later how it can come in handy when you want to do really precision work. So this would be the most precise selection tool. There's also the quick selection tool, which would select stuff based on the pixel colors around. So if I click it here, obviously this is a very simple drawing. I have only basically 3 colors. So if I click it into the red bit, you can see it. Oh, sorry. It automatically selects the red bit. So if I just click it here, it selects around it, and if I click on the purple one, it will always add to the selection. So you see the little plus in the middle. Whereas if you click on the minus, it will deselect the certain areas I have chosen. I think the easiest way to understand how that works probably just to have a little play around with them. And you will see that there's the selection tool, adding tool, and so the minus sign is so you're taking it away from your selection tool. Then we have a crop tool, which allows you to crop your drawing in case you have something that is not the right size and you want to, you can either set it to the preset proportions, or alternatively you can always just add in your own proportions if you want to. And if I wanted to, for example, make this square, I would just then hit enter, and now it's a square drawing, and it has cut away all the bits from the sides. So be careful that it obviously, once you crop it away, you won't be able to get back to it easily unless you have, well, depending on your settings, but you should only crop it once you are certain of what you're doing. And yeah, that's the crop tool. Next one is the eyedropper. So this will allow you to select a certain color. So if I select this, oh sorry, the eyedropper, you just select the color, and you will see that in this color box here, it has selected the red color, alternatively the purple, the white, and I think I can even go into the sides, or if I have something else open, I can just select the specific color. Obviously, this is very, very useful when you're working on photos and you have, I don't know, thousands or millions of colors. You can select exactly the color you need in case you are doing some editing, some spot treatment, that kind of stuff. So we have some spot healing brushes, which I will show you in the next part of this tutorial, which will be when I'm editing a drawing that has been photographed. And next we have brush tool, which is really useful. So if I select it here, you can see the brush options on top. Obviously the size now is very large, so it's like 1100 pixels large. So I can just draw it smaller here. If you have a brush and you know exactly how big you want it, you just type in a number, and you will see that actually. So this is just a basic round brush, and you can obviously draw stuff with it. However, you can also choose a specific type of brush. So if you go down here, I think I can. Oh, sorry. I can extend it, just make it slightly bigger, and you will see that there's some brushes which I have probably preloaded earlier, some of the default ones. So for example, scatter brush, which, well, this doesn't help, but if I make it larger, and the shortcut is the square brackets on the keyboard, so the sort of like the right one of the brackets makes it smaller, and the other one makes the brush bigger. And if I press now, you can see that this is sort of like that type of brush. The really good thing about Photoshop is you can find brushes online. So if you go, there's certain websites I can direct you to some, but usually if you just type in Google Photoshop brushes or free Photoshop brushes, you can find quite a variety of brushes, which are really useful for stuff like adding some quick shapes to your drawings. Obviously, they're not going to be detailed in color, so you can only make them in the color you have. But for stuff like adding people shapes, or adding some vegetation stuff, as stuff like trees or plants in your plans or your sections, is actually quite a quick and valuable tool. Or I think what I have here is some grass. So yeah, you will see that this is actually a brush which is, as you can see, every next one I draw is slightly different. So it's actually a brush which is set up to be, it has some sort of like randomness factor in it. So if let's say this was, let's say this is a drawing of a very bright building, and I wanted to add some grass, and actually I'll make it green. So choose a bright green color, and as I drag it along here, you will see that I'm creating a grass shape. And obviously, the more I drag it, the more grass it adds, which is pretty cool. Definitely something that is useful to learn and test out and see how it goes. The wrong thing I did in here, however, is that I did my brushes into the same layer as I have here. So obviously now if I wanted to move them around or change them, it would be quite difficult for me to actually do anything, because it's all sort of like blended together. So if I went to the eraser tool and started erasing, you would see that I'm erasing everything. I'll remove this. I'll go into a new layer here, and I'll go back to my brushes. And also for these brushes that I have downloaded, you can see that it has a size, so 134 is the pixel size for this brush, so you can go smaller. However, if I was gonna go bigger, just make it very big, you will see that those brushes become sort of blurry and pixelated, and they're not actually as crisp. And this is where it becomes obvious. Obviously, Photoshop is a raster graphics, so you don't want to make it blurry, and if the brush has been set to a certain size, that is the size you need to stick to, otherwise you will just get them blurry, which is an important thing to remember. So this one was, yeah, if you just click again and it will come back to its default size. And if you don't like the size of this brush, you can try and look for a different one which is bigger. I wonder what these brushes are, so yeah. And as I said, if I'm doing layers, so I'll just do this the same thing I did before, but with the green color selected and on separate layers. So if I decide that I don't actually like parts of these brushes, I can just go in here, and if I go into my eraser tool, I can delete. I'm deleting my brush strokes, but I'm not actually affecting the layers underneath. So layers are quite important. And if you want to select everything on your layer, you select the layer and you go Control A, so it selects everything that's on there, and you just delete it, or well, do something else with it. Okay, so I hope brushes are clear. Obviously, there's much more to them, but it's one of those things you learn by doing, and yeah, just try it out, and you will see how useful they are. So stamping tool, it allows you to clone stamps, so it allows you to select something and repeat it. So I'll make it slightly bigger. So what it does, it takes it takes a specific source of your drawing, and then it replicates it. In this drawing, it's quite difficult to show it because it's there's really not that much detail going on. But for example, if I went into to select the stamp base, you would click Alt on your or Option key on your keyboard, and then you click and you select the specific color. Obviously now nothing is happening because I'm in a layer which is completely empty. However, if I went into this layer and I selected, for example, my brush here, so I'm pressing Alt on my keyboard and I'm clicking, so I have selected the brush, and now when I go around, you can see that it's repeating that particular brush. And I don't need to put it in the same layer, so I'll go into my new layer here, and I will add my stamp tool here, and you can see it's sort of like, in some ways, intelligent that it already remembers where I was in the drawing, and it's sort of like replicating that part in this particular space, and as I paint over it, I'm basically replicating the same exact shape. Yeah, I don't know how much sense it makes now, but I will try and use it again in the next tutorial when I move on. I'll leave this here. So what we have here, so there's a history brush which allows you to go through steps in your history and apply them. I'm not going to go into detail about that one now because that's a bit more advanced. And here we have a eraser tool, which is very useful, and it does what it says. It basically uses the same setups as your brushes, so you will see that it has the same exact options as your brushes do, but what it does, instead of adding color, it just takes it away, so it erases. And if I use my grass one that I used before, you will see that it just actually erases the color of my brush, of my drawing in the shape of that particular brush that I have chosen. So again, it can be really useful for making inverted stuff, or just going into detail and deleting or creating stuff. I'll just delete this layer because it's just getting a bit messy, and I'll create a new one. And as I was showing before, I'll just use the green background for the eraser. If I go into the round ones, the same thing with the square brackets. So if I do the right square bracket, it increases the size of the brush. So if I use it now, you would see it erases everything. And if I use the other square bracket, it just makes the brush size smaller. And again, you can see it makes it smaller. So now we have the paint bucket, which I have been already using while showing you stuff here. So if you just go into a layer and click, it will just paint what is available to it. So in this layer, obviously, because I'm in a new layer, it's everything. If I go into layer 1, which is this shape here, for example, if I clicked it here, you will see it only paints in the bit in between. Or if I clicked it here again, it's sort of like it chooses the color boundary based on the pixel properties. As these are three very distinct colors, it's very easy for it to do the sharp lines. However, if you wanted to recolor something in a photo, for example, which has loads of colors, you might need to at first use the Lasso tool to actually select the part you want to repaint, and then you can use this. Alright, next we have um, the blur tool, which I'm not going to talk about. Actually, under the paint bucket tool, we have the gradient tool. So here you can select what type of gradient you want, and you can design your own. And if I use that tool and I draw a shape, and I go into the gradient tool, you click and you drag, and this is the direction of your gradient, and you will see that it fills it up with the specific gradient. That's actually turned out quite nice. Obviously, as you can see, what I did here, I did it on the same layer as as my other stuff was. So if you want to move it around, unfortunately, it takes the entire thing, which is not actually what I wanted. So I'll go back. I will go into this layer, and I will use the gradient tool. So now, if I wanted to, I can just move it around, and you can see it creates. It's depending on the gradient settings, you can have some transparency, which you can obviously also change later on as well. It's not a massive problem. Alright, so here we have a typing tool, which I do not recommend using in Photoshop because, as I said before, it's a raster-based software. So, well, you can make text boxes and you can type in text, and you can use all the properties you would normally use in the text editor. The problem is, once you export it, it will export as a raster, so you will lose some quality, and you won't be able to do as much manipulation with your text and your fonts as you would if you just did it in Illustrator or InDesign. So, while there are purposes where this is a useful tool, I would sort of like stay away from it, especially if you have other software available for you to add text on your drawings later. So I'll just delete this layer here, and so yeah, and yeah, another thing is here you can just draw basic shapes, similarly as you could do it with the marquee tool and then fill it, or here you can just choose your rectangle shape, you can choose your fill, you can choose your stroke color, your stroke width, and all these things, and then you can draw the shape, and there it is. And obviously the stroke is barely visible because it's only 1 pixel wide, but you get the idea. And it's quite useful if you need it. And then we have the hand tool. So this is the padding around the drawing. At the moment, it's not going to do anything because I'm already zoomed out. But if I zoom in, it allows you to just move around and see the parts of your drawing that you need. And also, the useful shortcut is if you are in a different mode, you can just press spacebar, and as you have pressed spacebar, you'll be able to move around. And the next one is the zoom tool. So here I'm zooming into my drawing. Obviously now it's getting into the pixels, and you can change it to the zoom out tool up there, and it basically zooms out relevant to where you're pressing it. And also the quick shortcut is if you press Alt key on your keyboard and you click on the zoom, it changes around which type of zoom you're using. So it's a very quick way to go into detail in your drawings. Alright, so this is the basic introduction about the tool.